Welcome back to the show. We got a great one lined up. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back. Yeah, you all know what time it is. You can follow us on X, YouTube, at DigPerspectives.com for exclusive content. Right now, $3.24 trillion market cap for crypto. The market is off 0.4. 101,000 plus for Bitcoin, 2,200 plus for Ethereum. XRP number 4 spots $2.02. Now we're up 3.5 on the 24, but we're off 10.5 on the 7-day. The range of price here ranging between 192 on the bottom and 204 on the top. You can see XRP's been recovering, and honestly, all the markets have been recovering after the recent attacks and strikes on Iran. So I believe that's what we can attribute the downside of the downturn in the markets, not just crypto, for. But I do want to tell people before we get started, look, you guys know Caleb and Brown, DAI and myself, been working with them. You can go to XRPwealth589.com and start getting the best night's sleep you've ever had since you've been into crypto. Why? Because if you're in and out of crypto and you're moving in and out of different assets, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to feel better anywhere else than on Caleb and Brown. Why? Because they have free institutional grade custody, no hidden fees, no hidden spreads. And I tell you something, don't listen to these people out here trying to throw shade on them. They don't want to acknowledge the truth. Right? The truth is they do have institutional grade custody with Fireblocks. We've talked with Caleb and Brown, and anyone who's saying so is trying to throw shade, and they need to be called out why that exactly is. Nonetheless, what we're looking at here is a really incredible opportunity, because you get a chance to speak to human customer service, ladies and gentlemen, whether you want to set your market orders correctly or you just want to ask a question about some kind of technical issue with your account. Multiple layers of security, everything that you could want, plus human customer service. I'm telling you, hands down, this is a remarkable service and platform, and everybody to a person is absolutely incredible to deal with. XRPwealth589.com. Open your free account and get started today. Well, here's the latest. OKX is reportedly considering an IPO in the U.S. following its U.S. relaunch in April. Well, this makes sense because we've already seen Circle hit the line, and there's a couple others in the line, and this is IPO season. This is also, I believe, coupled with the legislation that is currently being worked on in the United States to get passed and signed into law. I think with all of those things coming together, we are seeing the .com era for crypto has begun. No question about it. And it's much bigger than just introducing crypto to the world, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we did have an incident where some strikes and a mission was followed through, where we had strikes in Iran on nuclear sites, ladies and gentlemen. Those airstrikes in 3 different locations were very successful, according to the President Trump and the administration. And we know now that Iran is also planning on closing the Strait of Hormuz, this little area right here, because it's about a 21-mile stretch between these 2 points, but the shipping lanes are only about a mile or 2 wide through this area. So it's very easy for Iran, which is the land right here, to come out with ships and really close down that lane there. So what's the big major concern? Oil prices. President Trump comes out, everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Don't do it, he says. Understanding that Iran looking to close the Strait of Hormuz. We'll see how this goes. But what does it really mean when you're talking about oil? You're also talking about the US dollar. 90% of China-Russia trade is now settled in yuan and the ruble. More and more countries are following their lead and ditching the US dollar. Any reserve currency dominance ended after an average period of 80 to 110 years. The US dollar has been the global reserve currency for 80 years. Time to get a new one. XRP could become the new digital reserve currency, according to David Schwartz. This is where we are. This is where we are. And we know that the global reserve currency, the US dollar, the national currency, is tied to the petrodollar agreement. The idea is to relieve that agreement and move to the private issuance of stable coins, requiring all the new private issuers, highly regulated on a federal level and state level, to hold U.S. treasuries to the tune that it makes the petrodollar agreement look like child's play. That's the key. And I also believe while that's happening, to drive enough liquidity and utility on the XRP ledger that this could be true. And this is David Andolfado, Federal Reserve St. Louis at the time. Take a listen.
Does anybody use Ripple? Wow. I think you guys might be the winners.
Yeah, I think that we might be the winners too. Because I don't know anyone that has a system set up that is currency agnostic that could accommodate such a transition in the financial world. Not to mention the fact that not only does David Andolfado, formerly of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, current economic professor right now, believe that Ripple could win. Ripple is winning. They bought Hidden Road for $1.25 billion. They're connected to the DTCC that does over $2 quadrillion in settlement. That's a lot of liquidity they're tapping into. What are they doing around the world? 50 Japanese banks adopt XRP. This is Emi Yoshikawa when she was there. Take a quick listen.
So now what we are doing in Japan is we created a consortium of more than 50 banks to come together to develop a completely new payments platform or infrastructure powered by Ripple's distributed ledger technology.
There you have it right there. And when are we going to see the yen stablecoin or yen CBDC? I don't know. But we have the Singapore stablecoin. We have multiple euro stablecoins and US dollar stablecoins, Brazilian real. It's all coming, ladies and gentlemen. And so is legislation, which I believe will be the catalyst for this space, because it is about preserving the U.S. dollar. The United States dollar has been the global reserve currency since 1944. That's 79 years. Out of the last 5 global reserve currencies, 2 of them came to an end at 80 years. Ask yourself, what will the life cycle of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency be? How long will a monetary paradigm shift take with the current technology we have today? That's what we're talking about here. How long is the transition going to take? That's the question. And it will take some time. But this is where we are. And it is about the US dollar. That's why the stablecoin legislation passed first, I believe. I believe it's also why we will get the tax bill and the market infrastructure bill. Because why? Because people on both sides of the aisle and Capitol Hill understand this. Feel how you want to feel about it. But not getting the rest of the legislation through is a non-starter. And the truth of the matter is you need all the legislation for it all to work. What is all? The digital dollar securing its place in a new digital on-chain economy as the world reserve currency. That is the #1 goal. Then you can bring XRP in and integrate it as a bridge currency. And as it builds liquidity on the network, you can take advantage of the utility of that asset. Remember, XRP gets the privileged position of being looked at first for settlement before anything else. This one's from a while back in 2022. This is Deloitte, one of the big 4 accounting consulting firms, has known about XRP since 2015. The strongest possible driver for global adoption of the global reserve currency would be global institutions that can force their will on most cross-border trade, mandating its use. Don't believe it? Yeah. There's Deloitte right there. Ripple is another cryptography-based approach. cryptocurrency XRP. Ripple replaces block mining, distributed database, information about all Ripple accounts. XRP is a key technology in overall Ripple solution. The Ripple protocol allows any currency to be traded over the network, not just XRP. I'm going to bring you to the big part here in a second. XRP can be used as a bridge currency to facilitate exchanges between two currencies not commonly traded, making it challenging to establish an accurate currency-to-currency exchange rate. Well, let's keep going here, because they have quite a bit to say about it. The SDR was created to support the Bretton Woods fixed exchange rate system, which has really been abandoned. Money is technology for resolving obligations between individuals who don't know or don't trust each other. Are you ready for this? The strongest, this is Deloitte, one of the largest 4 accounting consulting firms in the world. The strongest possible driver for national adoption of a cryptocurrency is for the national government to mandate that taxes be paid in the cryptocurrency. Similarly, the strongest possible driver for global adoption of a global reserve currency would be global institutions that can force their will on most cross-border trade, mandating its use. So you fill in the real USD, digital stablecoin, and then you fill in the blank on XRP. That's what we're looking at here. In a trusted third currency, which by sheer size may be the global reserve currency, or in a weighted basket of currencies as risk management strategy to limit exposure to any single currency. This is where I think XRP really wins overall, is that you could have a basket of reserves that are represented on the XRP ledger that are held to really back the value of XRP, which could then underpin the US dollar. I believe this and have for a very long time. Not to mention, another incentive would be to what? To offer these value protocols without capital gains. Take a listen. Christian Carlo.
Day 2 is to deliver on some of Trump's digital asset promises, a strategic reserve, a crypto council, and perhaps a capital gains relief for digital asset transactions.
This is a big deal. Why would all of the financial system want to use these new blockchain rails if I'm just going to turn around and use these new digital assets that are so amazing, and then you want me to pay capital gains on them at the end of the year? Oh, that dog don't hunt at Bradley's house. Now, the question remains is, will the money transmitter license holders, the money payment providers, and the financial institutions get no tax on transactions, but us retail folk do? Now, that could be something. But nonetheless, this is all about adoption, just like Deloitte that I showed you. Remember this from David Schwartz? Listen to when he was asked about 2 currencies existing as a global reserve currency at the same time.
Do you believe that there can be 2 existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as their reserve currency. And I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks, like people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that, only like 10 banks in the country, on the planet, are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks, those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the U.S., that's grown the U.S. economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the U.S. holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital assets. If these countries are like, okay, well, the US dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the US dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the money question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
How do you get everybody to agree? Well, before you hear David's answer, I'll get you. Here's how you get everybody to agree. You give them some. You give everybody who has a certain level of utility or liquidity to provide the network, you give them some XRP and a pre-allocated option contract, just like you did R3 back in the day. But let's hear David's answer.
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
Yeah, I don't think they will either, and I know I won't. Shout out to David Schwartz for that answer. Yeah, maybe on track for $11.50 to $42. Here's what I say. Let's get that legislation passed and sky's the limit, baby, because once the legislation's passed in all areas, taxes, market infrastructure, and stablecoin bill, there's nothing left to talk about. There's only to sit back and watch the world adopt it and go and go and go and continue to grow and grow and grow. That's exactly where we're about to be. And what a moment that is going to be when we get there. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. It's just my digital perspectives. I'll catch all of you on the next one.